from the meeting for no legitimate reason other than that I submitted information and asked for a response. They have now, Stalinist like, removed that from the meeting that's posted on YouTube as if it had never occurred. There's been no notification to the membership or the public that this has happened. Well, I only have 3 minutes and I could go on for hours, but this is just the unfortunate situation. Since you do provide most of the funding for this nonprofit, it's rather important that you be advised and some form of action ultimately be taken. And I'll be in touch with you in the future. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Eigel. And as you know, we welcome written testimony. Mr. Eigel is the only person signed up in Harris Hall. Ms. Jones, do we have anyone signed up for the online queue?
Thank you, Chair Farr. At this time, we do not have anyone in the online queue.
Anyone else in Harris Hall wishing to address the Board of County Commissioners? Seeing none, I will close the public comment period and move directly down our agenda to Commissioner's response to public comments and or other issues and remonstrance. First thing I'll mention is if you look through the back window, there's not a lot of activity right now. Across High Street, you'll see the Lane County Farmers Market. It's a year-round farmers market, currently with an indoor and outdoor facility. It's a pretty wonderful thing for me to look at. You have to turn around to see it yourselves. With that, I'll move to the board for response or issues and remonstrances. I am seeing none at this time. The only thing I will mention then is I have in my hand, I voted stickers. If you have, you can have one. If you haven't, do. You should have received your ballots in the mail over the last couple of days. So ballots are in your mailbox or in hand. Be sure to use them. I'll pass them along. And I haven't, so I don't have one on yet. I've not quite voted yet. Very good.
Just did it this morning.
All right. Then, Mr. Mokrice, can I hand you one, or we? I'm not worrying when I'm not going to put you on the spot.
Turn my ballot in.
Very good. Any further remonstrances? Then we'll move down our agenda to the consent calendar. We have before us a short consent calendar. The items on the consent calendar for anybody who's here or online, if you click on view material, you'll be able to see all of the issues and in detail on the consent calendar that the Board of County Commissioners has decided to keep on the consent calendar. It'll be passed in a single motion. Do I have a motion? Vice Chair.
Chair, I'll move approval of the consent calendar for Tuesday, October 25th, 2022.
Second.
Moved by Vice Chair Trigger and seconded by Commissioner Burney. The consent calendar. Discussion to the motion. I see none. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. Then we'll move down to item 6. We're moving pretty fast, Ms. Haller. It's the Sheriff's Office, item 6A, a resolution order 2210-2501 in the matter of accepting a grant award from the Board of Justice Assistance in the amount of $750,000 for the Lane County Adult Drug Court Discretionary Grant Program and delegating authority to the county administrator to execute the award documents and associated subcontracts and increasing FY23 appropriations in the Special Revenue Fund 260 within the Department of Public Safety in the amount of $182,000. We were ahead on the agenda, now we're behind.
Sorry about that.
And Ms. Heller, I'll look directly to you. Normally I would ask Mr. Mokrice, but you are in Sheriff Harold's office, so I'll call on you directly.
Thank you, Chair Farr and Commissioners. Today I'm joined by Joe Vigil, and I'm writing his title down because it's gotten quite lengthy. He is now the statewide Specialty Court Case Management System Analyst. And Lisa Daly, who is the new Senior Treatment Court Coordinator. And today, as you just read, we're asking the board to approve the acceptance of a Bureau of Justice Assistance Grant Award for the Adult Treatment Court. And then I'm going to turn it over to Joe and Lisa, who are the experts.
All right.
All right. Good morning, Chair Farr and Commissioners. Lisa is my new replacement, so she'll be here in Lane County. I'm now in Salem, but I wanted to come here since I helped do this grant and make a presentation to you all. So Lane County was one of 63 programs awarded through the Bureau of Justice Assistance Grant Adult Drug Court Discretionary Grant Program. The project purpose is to establish equitable access to the Adult Treatment Court program. The project objective is to sustain and build infrastructure necessary for equitable access and service. And in order to achieve this objective, the grant will create the following positions and services. So the first position will be an engagement counselor. This will be a full FTE position that will focus on facilitating rural engagement telehealth, outpatient, intensive outpatient, complete in-person assessments at our rural engagement sites that will hopefully be located in Cottage Grove and Florence, complete enhanced engagement and connection programming for participants during their evaluation and assessment period, and they will provide a virtual component of therapy and wraparound services. We will also be adding a recovery navigator case management position that will be a full FTE. This position will monitor program participants' compliance through the regularly scheduled contact, along with tracking progress through the court levels. The case manager will be responsible for understanding and implementing best practices in the supervision of treatment court participants and for coordinating all aspects of the program. They'll be familiar with treatment and services available in the community to break down barriers for the program participants, and they'll be able to recommend services to enhance the recovery process. This position will also be responsible for performing screenings on new referral cases and coordinating rural engagement for the participants. This position will also be able to be mobile and drive anywhere in Lane County to provide services to the participants. We are also asking for funding for UA collection. Currently, the UA collection is all done right here downtown in Eugene. The funding will allow now for UA collection in Cottage Grove and Florence 2 times a week. And then we're also asking for some funding for staff of the treatment court team to go to the National Association of Drug Court Professionals Conference. Lots of big titles, sorry. So a little history, the adult treatment court program has up until this point required participants to move to the Eugene Springfield area if they chose to participate in the drug court program. But due to the size of Lane County and the geographic distance for many residents, this has created a disparity to access to the program. And so with the challenges faced to us by the COVID-19 pandemic, it became clear that we are able to operate in a more virtual environment when necessary. So this position and services provided through this grant will allow us to create a virtual group session, virtual individual sessions, virtual court appearances, and rural UA collection for those who live in Lane County and the rural areas of our community. The addition of objective screening criteria will also support a better access for everyone in the program, not just for those living rurally, but for those maybe from marginalized portions of our community. So once this grant has been approved and accepted, staff will develop requests for proposals for the positions and services included in this grant, and we will get going. So
Thank you.
welcome any questions.
Ms. Daly, anything to add?
Nothing to add, just deep appreciation for the grant writing team, Joe Vigil, Debbie Holler, and Denise Walters, who's in the audience today. They submitted the grant in May before I arrived, so they did all the work, and I'm excited to be a part of the implementation.
Well, howdy and welcome to your new position.
Thank you.
Boy, I'll tell you, it's pretty exciting work that you're doing. And Mr. Vigil, thank you for being here to help with the transition. And Ms. Heller, thank you for bringing us our daily vigil. We needed that.
Here I am.
Okay, no. Then any questions from the board? I am seeing none. Oh, Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation and for this really important work. I'm scrolling back through because I reviewed this last week and don't remember. Does it say oh, there it is, 4-year period. And is this a grant we've applied for before and not received? Is it a new source of funding? Do we have a sense of what the future of this funding looks like?
So we've received BJA grants. We have a current BJA grant for the Veterans Treatment Court program. And historically, I'm trying to remember, I believe we have received BJA funding. I don't think that we've been denied a BJA grant in the past. So, but it is a grant that comes out every year. So I think that there's, a possibility for future applications.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Good question. Thank you. Further comments, Commissioner Bernie.
I respond to Vice Chair. No, I'm sorry, Vice Chair Trieger, I don't. I was reading the paper this morning. Oregon's awash in drugs. Springfield may apply for federal funding to start drug treatment court. Is there a connection between what you're doing in this or no?
Not with what Springfield's doing. I mean, I've had conversations with Springfield. They've asked about it, but our program does serve all of Lane County. So we do serve those in Springfield. And I know that they have been talking about creating some sort of a treatment court program as well. And my take on that would be that that we would definitely continue to coordinate. We actually know people who work on that who used to be on our team. So there's a lot of communication. So we would definitely be partners in the community. Yeah.
Thank you. So with the indulgence of the chair, So in 49 years ago, in 1973, as an undergraduate, I was involved in a drug education program that was federally funded. And the thesis of it was not clinical based, where there's something wrong with the person, but more social action based, which is the greatest way to generate a sense of meaning and purpose and belongingness and usefulness and security and hope for the future, is to take little steps to change your environment, to change the environment, leading to social action. Fundamentally different approach with different kinds of program implications. Which is this?
Right. Yeah, a large focus of the national training is on building what they call recovery capital. And this speaks exactly to that, making sure people have stability in their lives. Our past practice of making people leave, potentially if they owned a home in Florence, but you need to move here to participate, maybe was misguided, you know, so this will help us cement their life wherever they are in Lane County and hopefully build it better for them.
Hopefully you won't cement their life, right? You will help them.
Exactly. Give them the tools that they
Yes.
would need. Yes, sorry.
Thank you for the indulgence, Chair.
Well,
Thank you very
for
much.
That avenue, that's good information to receive. Further comments or questions? Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you. And I just have to say that the treatment courts, whether it's drug court or veterans and our downward departure programs that we run here in Lane County, are just amazing programs. And anyone wants to be inspired, come to a treatment court graduation. You know, it's an amazing event, and listen to people, family members testify at these graduations about how they got their husband back, or they got their father back, or they got their sister back. And the actual participants talk about, if not for this, I would be dead right now. It's just amazingly effective. The effectiveness has been tested through randomized control testing, very rigorous testing. It's evidence-based. It works. I'm glad to see it expanding to rural areas with this grant. But just a quick question, and it might be more of a Debbie question. How many different funding sources have we patched together to keep treatment courts moving in Lane County? I know of at least 3 in my head where we're using pieces of justice reinvestment money. We're using community corrections money. Now we got grants we're doing. There's OJD money, which I've actually testified in favor of OJD's budget up in Salem in the past. People don't understand that a lot of these programs are being literally run on shoestring, patched together grants, and it's a shame that we have to do that to run such an effective system. So any idea, just off?
Do you want me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, as I say, I know that we have federal funding at one time or another, most of the time for all of the programs. We rely on the state funding through the Criminal Justice Commission. Every biennium we apply for that. Then there's also local community foundation funding through the John Serbu Fund. And then anything else?
No, I think the only court that doesn't have any federal funding is the mental health
Yes.
treatment court at this point in time.
Yeah, it's one of the things we need to pay attention to. And we had a long discussion last week about our community corrections system and justice reinvestment funding in Salem that is, arranged in such a way that we're actually not being rewarded for being successful. And are looking at a huge cliff of $5 to $7 million next year in that fund, which puts in jeopardy some of these very, excellent programs that change people's lives, and return that human capital back to our society that had been lost to addiction or mental health or other issues. So I just kind of a continuation from last week's discussion. We really have to pay attention to this upcoming session in Salem and really work hard to get the state to support its partnership with counties in executing some of these systems.
And I will say that Lane County is probably one of the shining examples of all of the community and county, state, local agencies working together for treatment courts. I'm in a statewide role now, and I don't see that in every county in Oregon. So Lane County does an awesome job.
We do well here.
Thank you,
I
Commissioner.
look over at my administrator and the sheriff and the DA and the judges here all understand we got to work together.
For the discussion.
I'll just add that I'm really pleased that the additional access in our rural areas is absolutely hands down an equitable issue. Especially, I didn't know that they had to move to the Eugene Springfield area just to be in the program, and we're leaving so many people out. Do you know how many people will be able to add from those rural areas into the program?
I don't have a definitive number. I can tell you just anecdotally, in the time I've worked in the program, it's probably 2 or 3 people a year that don't end up participating. But that's just the ones who actually show up on the docket. You know, I'm not sure how many lawyers talk to their clients and say, oh, you can't do this. So I don't know. And I think part of the funding allowing the navigator will also be allowing us to help collect some of that data as well with this grant and to evaluate that further as well for further need.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Burning.
Thank you. Congratulations. And to a previous comment, in the 50 years I've been working and it's been in and out of this system, there's never been a time when people didn't have to patch dollars together. Oftentimes the most critical services are those least funded. And oftentimes you find some of the greatest entrepreneurs actually in the nonprofit or the public service sector piecing these programs together. That's not unusual, Commissioner. What is really cool though, I'd like to point out, is it's at the local level that you create a quote unquote system, because there is no system being supported that I can see, at least on federal or state levels. There are pieces, there are silos. And the fact that you have taken silos and created a system with a program is a tremendous accomplishment. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And, you know, I attend the court graduations as often as I can. Sometimes it's big in here in Harris Hall, sometimes it's small in a courtroom, but every single time there's never an occasion where tears aren't present, you know, whether it's a family crying or actually the participants crying, or sometimes it's just me, you know, because there really are poignant stories that are attached to every single person graduating. And you know, it's one thing that's really particularly cool about it is that when you're there, you see the peer support, the people who've already gone through the program there to bring everybody through the program, and it grows and grows and grows. And Mr. Vigil, you say that Lane County is a shining example for the entire state to look at. Let's keep that star shining. Thank you very much for your work, and thank you for your ongoing work. Ms. Walters, salute you for being here. Ms. Holler, thank you very much. Anything you'd like to add?
There's a graduation November 4th at 1 p.m. here in Harris Hall, if you'd like to join.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Wait, we've got to pass a resolution.
Yeah.
Oh, we do. Will you stay for just a moment longer, please? We do have a resolution before us. I won't read the text, but it's resolution in order 2210-2501. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I'll second.
Moved by Commissioner Bozovich and seconded by Commissioner Buck. Resolution and order 2210-2501. Discussion to the motion. I'm seeing none. We'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. You may leave. Dismissed. Thank you very much for being here. Next today is the panel changes. We have item 7A, which is human resources, order 2210-2502, in the matter of approving a contract for life and disability insurance services and leave administration, including establishing an equivalent plan for paid leave Oregon insurance for Lane County employees and delegating authority to the county administrator to execute the 3-year agreement with potential for up to 2. Would you make these order titles smaller from now on, please? Mr. Mokryski, I'll turn it over to you to introduce the panel and begin the item.
Thank you, Chair. We have Crystal Tuller here, our Workforce Wellness Manager in Human Resources. I'm going to turn over to Crystal to introduce the rest of the group and introduce the item.
Good morning, Chair Farr and Commissioners. At the table with me are Christine Moody and Sherry Sanders, as well as others in the audience from our internal Paid Leave Oregon Committee, if the need arises. The county provides group life insurance, voluntary life, and AD&D options and leave administration which includes short-term disability, long-term disability insurance, and protected leaves consisting of family and medical leave, FEMLA, and Oregon Family Leave, OFLA, for Lane County employees. The Hartford is the current insurer the county contracts with to provide the administration of these services. This morning, we are here to bring a recommendation forward to approve a new contract with the Standard for life and disability insurance services and leave administration. Additionally, we are recommending establishing an equivalent plan for paid leave Oregon insurance for Lane County employees through the Standard. In September of 2019, Oregon House Bill 2005 was signed into law to create Paid Leave Oregon, also known as PLO, a family and medical leave insurance program to provide partially or fully compensated time away from work to covered individuals who meet certain criteria while the covered individual is on family leave, medical leave, or safe leave. While originally employer and employee contributions were scheduled to become effective January 1st, 2022, with benefit payments beginning on January 1st, 2023, the COVID-19 pandemic resulted in movement of the effective date of employer and employee contributions to January 1st, 2023, with benefit payments to begin September 3rd, 2023. Oregon employers have the following options on how to provide the PLO leave benefit to eligible employees. 1, participate in the state-run plan. 2, contract with a third-party administrator for an equivalent plan. Or 3, administer the benefit internally. The state-run plan has set the contribution level effective January 1st, 2023 at 1% of wages up to a cap, with 60% contributed by employees and 40% contributed by employers, subject to bargaining. Any equivalent plan contribution cost to employees is capped at 60% of the state rate. To assure compliance with PLO, we have been working with USI Insurance Services, the county's benefits consultant, and have formed both an internal committee and an external committee, which consisted of regional and statewide partners to navigate the law and determine best practices. We also met with a local government agency from Washington State to discuss their experience, navigation, and advice following the passage of a similar leave plan. Due to the size of the county, the complexity of the PLO benefit, and the coordination of PLO with the county's other leave benefits, providing internal administration of PLO is not feasible. The recommendation to move forward with an equivalent plan versus having Oregon State administer PLO follows months of research and committee discussions regarding the need to improve the customer service experience for employees and financial impacts to the county. A presentation to Lane County department heads also occurred to discuss options and recommendations and gain support to move forward with the RFP process to replace the Hartford and include the administration of an equivalent plan for PLO. While there may be benefits to going with the state's plan or administering in-house, with some rules still to be finalized and uncertainty of total costs, we found establishing an equivalent plan to be the best option as we work through this new law. The key reasons county staff is recommending the creation of an equivalent plan are: employees will be able to contact one administrator for all leave types. Lane County would pay for Lane County employees' leaves only, not pay into a pool containing employees statewide. The county will have the ability to ensure that the coordination of the different leaves available to employees are managed in a way that provides the greatest benefit available to employees, including other leave options under short-term disability, while also mitigating impacts on county services to the community when employees are out. And having an administrator that has contracted directly with the county will give us the ability to require a high-quality customer service for our employees. The Life, Disability, and Leaves Administration programs cover all eligible regular status employees. Paid Leave Oregon includes coverage for all regular, temporary, and extra help status employees, provided eligibility requirements are met. The life and disability insurance premiums are the cost drivers of the program. However, the level of service and support to the health and well-being of our employees was a significant deciding factor. We want to provide the best customer service to our employees when they are in need of utilizing these benefits. Our current provider, the Hartford, has not met the high level of customer service we expect from our vendors. The PLO premium with the standard is initially $111,891 higher annually than the projected 1% of payroll that the county would pay the state of Oregon if the county joined the state-run plan. The additional amount will be paid solely by the county in the first year, as again, employee contributions are capped at 60% of the state rate, which is currently 1%. Future year obligations will be dependent upon future adjustments to the state rate and bargaining. Staff believes that the efficiency, stability, and service to county employees provided by establishing an equivalent plan outweigh the initial additional costs. This will continue to be analyzed once the benefit goes into effect. With PLO effective September 3rd, 2023, and a complex transition for the existing life, disability, and leave administrations, the goal is to enter into a new contract as soon as possible so implementation can occur no later than May 1st, 2023. The options we present to you today are award the contract to the standard for 3 years with the possibility of 2 one-year extensions, and delegate authority to the county administrator to execute the agreement and extensions for life, leave, disability, and PLO through an equivalent plan with the standard, or award the contract to the standard for 3 years with the possibility of 2 one-year extensions, and delegate authority to the county administrator to execute the agreement and extensions for life, leave, and disability, and employees can file for PLO through the State of Oregon administered program. Staff recommends option 1. Again, thank you for your time this morning, Chair and Commissioners. I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Farr, for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Toller. Anyone else on the panel have anything to add? Then we'll turn it over for questions. And just a quick summary, it looks like you're recommending that we authorize the plan with the standard, which is about 111,000 higher, but that is offset by superior customer service, which all Lane County employees will benefit from. Is that a good synopsis? Very good. Discussion from the board? Commissioner Buck, followed by Vice Chair Trieger. Does he have? No, Commissioner Buck.
I'll start off with some questions. I've been getting calls from some of our employees that are really concerned about this particular subject. And unfortunately, it feels like it's a bit last minute because it's on, we're talking about it right now. And so luckily I was able to connect with Alana Holmes here, HR manager, on a couple of these things. And I think it's really important that some of those questions be addressed and answered here today. And so I'm going to start out with a couple of questions that I think Alana's got some answers for, but I think it's important for everybody in the meeting to be able to hear it, and those that those employees that have concerns know what some of these answers are. First off, it was a concern that they thought if we went to a private entity, that they would lose PERS or some other benefits associated, and that would not happen if they went with a state-run program. And so that's my first question, because I want to make sure that's addressed. There's some other probably more policy or philosophical arguments about whether we want to go with a state-run program or whether we want to go private with servicing this particular issue that I'll get into after the initial question here.
Chair Farr, Commissioner Buck, thank you for your questions and remarks. In a moment, I'm going to turn it over to Christine to answer that question. But first, I'd like to just frame a little bit for the board and the audience, some context around this very complicated legislation that was passed a few years ago. Of course, COVID hit. That took a toll of a couple of years, pushing this back out, also impacting the timing of information and rulemaking for not only our team, but all employers in the state of Oregon to figure out what we had to craft to be in compliance with the law. I mean, rulemaking mostly was finalized this past month. So while I can appreciate it feels that we are coming to you with a very short timeline here, it's because we've been trying to navigate and stay on top of as much as we could, and not knowing some of those final rules having a conversation without that complete information would have been more complicated because we might not have been able to flesh out everything we felt we needed to come forward. So number one, apologies for the feeling that this is more last minute and rushed, but we're working within the state regs and the information they're providing to us. So just wanted to share that in that context. And knowing at the state level, like everyone else, being shorthanded and COVID pushing a lot of work out, it's just very complicated. But to answer your question specifically about the impacts on whether we would go with the third-party administrator or the state plan on PERS, specifically, I wanted to turn it to Christine.
Sure, thank you. And actually, I'll just add that some of the state rules are still being determined. So it's that bad, yeah. So I attend an employer advisory group that's held by PERS. They have regular meetings throughout the year, and their last meeting was on October 14th. And so Lane County was actually we asked the question about the PERS coverage of these payments several months ago. And I've seen the answer more than once, but they said it again on the 14th. And I actually have the slide deck that they've prepared, but it's their chief operations officer who reported to us that the state plan is non-subject to PERS wages. And so is a third-party insurance company also non-subject to PERS wages. So going with the state plan would not make these PERS wages. So just to answer that piece of it. They're still working on some pieces around the contributions themselves that both employer and employees are making into the plan and whether those are, they're still working on taxable, whether these are taxable things, the Oregon Department of Revenue. So some of those answers are still to be determined, but on the PERS, they have stated they are non-subject PERS wages.
In addition to PERS, it was IAP as well. And will that be affected one way or the other?
That's a piece of PERS. So when it's non-subject wages, it's not going to touch PERS at all.
So neither of those things will matter regardless of whether we go private or whether we go with the state.
Correct.
Okay. Since those were very specific concerns that I received, I appreciate you being able to answer those here today, because that would have made me want to hold back. Now, there's other reasons advocates who originally created and fought for this measure of paid leave really were not interested in having a third-party option at all. Specifically more addressed to the policy level question of whether insurance or our medical care really should be privatized at all. And so that privatization of our medical and insurance needs have led to a lot of other philosophical questions in our whole nation in general, and profit making off of people's actual physical health needs. So here, there's still some of those philosophical and policy questions that we haven't fleshed out here at the board level. And I know that we are rushed because you have to make a decision and notify the state so that things will happen by January 1st. And I haven't felt like I've been able to have enough time to really go through those particular arguments and questions. And we can get into some of that today. But really, I would prefer a little extra time in order to actually ask and answer those questions thoroughly for me. And so the question is, how much time do we really have to make this decision? Do we have to make it today?
Thank you, Chair Farr, Commissioner Buck. November 30th is when we need to apply for the intent to go with an equivalent plan. So that is our deadline is November 30th.
Okay. So we don't have a lot of time, but we have a little bit of time. And before I turn it back over so other people can ask questions, the costs that you have put in here for standard, because it sounds like we've had some issues with Hartford and some of our employees have notified us of issues with Hartford. And so that's why you're suggesting going with standard. And the cost for that, which is about $110,000 for this 3-year term, is that above and beyond what we would have to pay if we went with the Oregon plan? Is there additional cost if we go with the Oregon plan also, or is that the gap more that you're suggesting we are willing to pay in order to privatize it?
Can answer that financial question. Thank you, Chair Farr, Commissioner Buck. So it is the looking just at the paid leave Oregon benefit. If we just look at that one, because this contract with the standard is for other leaves as well. That is the additional compared to the state plan. So if you just think about paid leave Oregon, the state or the standard, it's that 111,000 more for the time period. The other differences, I mean, we could get into things around claims and insurance and being locked into that amount, but I think that answers your question.
So there wouldn't be any additional costs if we went through the state?
That just the 111. There is an additional cost. So the estimated cost may be just for that paid leave Oregon. With the state plan, we estimate, just based on what we think our base wages will be, because it's 1%, would be about 1.1 million over the.
That's the premium though you're talking about.
That we have to pay the state.
Right.
Correct. With the standard, it's just over 1.2 million. So there's about 100, little over 100,000 more. Correct.
And that's just the cost of their service versus.
That's also that's the cost of everything. That's them paying the claims. That's the same thing that the state would be doing, paying the wage claims that employees are making, and then administering the plan and providing that customer service that's been talked about. All of that piece is in there.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll have some comments on that, but yeah, please, Ms. Owens.
May I add and look to Christine? You did mention, I think in passing, that this contract isn't just to be the third party administrator for the PLO. That we have heard the responses from our employees, and we also feel moving away from the Hartford for the other leaves that they've been administering would be best. So this contract really envelopes a broad array of services in addition to the PLO. And that focus is not only to provide customer service to our employees on the PLO, but for all leave scenarios. Employees come in sometimes with unplanned medical situations or some extreme hardships that they're trying to figure out, and it can be complicated. And so what we're trying to do is have one place that they can go to for all of them to better understand it, instead of saying, well, go to this company, this third party administrator for this kind. But if it's something else, then you need to go over here and handle it differently, so that, we're really trying to think of employees having a one stop for all of their needs. Especially in times when they're really challenged with medical situations or other family needs and obligations.
Chair Farr, can I just add to, employees come to us to help them navigate these systems. And our concern is, if it's with the state, we won't be able to have that hands-on approach that we like to have with our employees and turn them over to the state, and it would be between them and the state.
But the state is so wonderfully responsive on every single program they had. Never mind. Further discussion. Further discussion, Commissioner Bozovich.
Thank you. You actually gave enough information, some of those answers, to answer the question I have, which was how much is Lane County's 0.4% add up to, which if it's 1.1 million for 1%, that's 440,000 for our 0.4. I look at it, putting this all in one as a good thing, and the extra $111,891 is less than it would cost us to hire another employee to navigate that system of multiple providers and provide the customer service to our employees to not have to get a single point of contact. We would probably, if we don't put all these programs under one administrator of some kind, we're probably looking at another HR position. So add benefits, PERS and all that stuff to it, 111,000 seems pretty cheap in a lot of ways to me. And I don't have an issue with the third party looking at how well, things have been administered at the state. Third parties sometimes may be able to do a little bit better job. Just remember the Cover Oregon website. So yeah, I don't really have an issue there. I will just quickly state that I'm in favor of the contract, but I truly feel this was another unfunded mandate by the state of Oregon, placing cost on local governments without any compensation for it. And, should have probably been challenged constitutionally because it's a new program and it's not funded. No matter how good the goal is and all that stuff, it's an unfunded mandate. And that I just want to state that now, because 440,000 has got to come from somewhere. And we've been talking constantly about our the challenges Lane County faces financially. And that's just a reality that as long as we continue to get unfunded mandates from the state, it just adds to our problems.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozovich. I see Commissioner Bernie.
Okay, it's another unfunded mandate, but we got to do it. So let's figure this out. Number one, do I have this wrong? Some of you have told me just listening that you had to wait until everything was flushed out at the state. And then I believe I've also heard not everything is yet flushed out of the state. So some of the reasons for making this decision, we don't even know yet. You can correct me. I'm just trying to kind of give back what I'm getting from this. I also never heard, what I heard was, see, I'm not a big fan of private companies making money over from government programs, take an administrative cut and leave less dollars for direct services. I'm experiencing that now as I prepare for Medicare, and it is unfreaking believable. And all of these dollars that go to the private companies come from our tax dollars. And they create an administrative thing. So in that I'm experiencing that at this particular moment. Have we looked at self-administration?
Thank you, Commissioner Farr, reverse that. Sorry, a year ago. So I do have some information for you there, because Lane County is also not a fan of paying those administrative fees. And I think you've seen that in the, we're self-funded with our health insurance, which we've done very well with. We're also self-funded with our unemployment claims. We just get the bill from the state. We're paying just our claims. So, originally it was the thinking of the financial management team that why wouldn't we also be self-funded with this and just take on the risk that Lane County would have? After speaking with our benefit consultants and looking at the little bit of data that we have around leaves, because this is a whole new program that's going to provide leave that we're not tracking at all because people haven't asked for it yet, right? So we don't have data on what's going to be requested. But if we just look at those things, the risk to the county is too great to go into it the first year self-funded. We have no idea what those are. Just to give you some idea, I looked up the paid FEMLA hours. So what is covered already with employees, about 14,900 hours a year. If we look at the unpaid FEMLA OFLA, 15,000 hours, which is about 740,000 if we just apply the wage rate that applied in the paid and put benefits on it. And then extended sick leave is another 20,000 hours a year, which is another 988,000 a year. And then there's family leave that's not covered here at all. There's paternity, maternity leave, other leaves that we're definitely not tracking here. So even if these amounts were moved over to this paid Oregon leave, we would exceed the amount of the premium we're paying. So we feel like looking at this insurance plan, even though that's not our preferred, at least for the first year, and still we start to see what this looks like, what the claims look like, is the most fiscally responsible piece. And we also determined that our benefit consultants are not aware of anyone who is going self-funded. No one is willing to take that risk.
So just continue, Chair. So this is new information. So it sounds like what you're saying is the county wants to self-administer, but you need to be prudent and observe in fact how this operationally goes prior to making that decision. Some of this information is new to me. So you know what, I don't know if Commissioner Buck agrees with this or not, but I also feel there's a few board meetings between now and November 30th and would like to have more time to study and understand before that final decision is made within the time frame that you're saying it needs to be made by. Thank you, Chair.
There are 2 board meetings between now and November 30th, and that's the next 2 weeks, and then there's a large hiatus until November 30th. So, Ms. Holmes.
Chair Farr, thank you. Just adding on to what Christine shared, I think Crystal in her opening remarks talked about some of the work that was done, spanning beyond this last year. We formed an internal committee, many of them that you can see here today. This committee met, you look to the north and south of us, and we're kind of bookend with 2 states that already have a model like this in place, Washington being the newer in the last couple of years. So we turned to them and asked them, in the time you've had that in place, what are the lessons learned? What do you wish you knew starting out? What would be helpful for us as we're thinking of framing this within our organization? So that was really good information. The next step was Crystal and the team formed a cohort that included our local government partners, our regional partners, and some state partners, and worked through a lot of the questions of, as we saw the rulemaking potentially coming down and getting training to help best inform the recommendations that we would be bringing forward. And my understanding is that, including the local governments and our regional partners and at the state, that people are looking to the third-party administrator and not going with the state plan in this first year as well. So it's just a little bit more information and perspective of we've been trying to do our due diligence and working with as many others in similar circumstances to inform us.
Thank you, Ms. Holmes. Ms. Moody.
Thank you. And not a comment directly to that, but related to what I just said, I do want to make sure that when we're saying self-funded, when I said the county prefers to go self-funded, that is different than internally managing the program. So self-funded is hiring an expert like we do with our health insurance, where we pay Pacific Source to handle the claims. They're the expert on that piece. They send us the bill and we issue a check, the same way the unemployment. So I just wanted to make sure that's clear, because the memo does talk about an internally run plan. That's a very different thing.
Out of curiosity, Pacific Source are private, not nonprofit, right?
Correct.
Okay. Further discussion, Vice Chair?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I have several questions and some comments. First, just procedurally, this order is more than just the paid leave Oregon program, right? So we're being asked to make a decision about a number of things, some of which we have different concerns about than another. So that's something I think that's happening here, is there's a new program with questions, and it's not a standalone item, and that's presenting some challenges, I think. So I don't want to hold up the things that are smooth sailing, but I do have some questions and concerns about this proposal for the paid leave Oregon program specifically. First, regarding it being an unfunded mandate, that happens. It's a time to do some course correction for some historic systemic inequalities around wages, around our care economy. And there's a pinch point when we're at that moment, but somebody's paying for not having paid leave. And that's taxpayers too, because people now access public benefit programs because they're not getting wages when they have events in their lives that happens to all of us, when they have to care for an aging parent, when they have their own surgery, when they have a new child come into their life. So unfunded mandate, sure, you can call it that. I look at this more as making some adjustments to the ledger and how we balance it. And I have a question about timing. Is November 30th the deadline, and what do we default to? We have to opt out of a state program by November 30th. Otherwise we default into it. Is that correct?
Thank you, Chair Farr, Vice Chair Trieger. That is my understanding as well. Yes.
Okay. And we have the ability to renegotiate and do a different system annually. This is proposal for 3 years to a private company, but if we were to default into a state program, what happens a year from now, or are we tied into that for some amount of time? How does that work?
Thank you, Chair Farr, Vice Chair Trieger. My understanding is when you go with the state plan, it's by quarter, if I'm remembering correctly. And so we can change our course. On the other hand, if we do go with a third party, I think as Ms. Moody pointed out, we're looking at it for that first year, and then we could change course as well.
Thank you for that. I thought it was 3 years. We're being asked to sign a contract for 3 years with a private company.
It is a full 3-year contract because it's wrapping up all those other things with it, our life, leave, disability. We did ask that question just because of the concerns. We're not really sure what trajectory we're going to be on until it happens. And so that is what was indicated to us by the third party, and also working with USI, that, if after a year we could change course.
So the contract is for the suite of benefits, but the paid leave program is and could be reevaluated annually within that contract. Okay. I think I understand and I really appreciate this idea of improving customer service. I've heard that thrown around a lot. And I understand that some of the response is reflective of the current vendor. So I'm fully in support, completely trust y'all, have done your research. If they're not a vendor that's working for us, we want a different one, that's great. I think the debate now is, who is that different vendor? For me, the customer service experience comes when I actually have a claim I need to make. And I again, I'm only going to speak for myself, but I'm guessing there's nobody on this dais that hasn't experienced the frustration of trying to file a claim for something that seemed pretty straightforward and getting essentially the runaround and getting all the loopholes of, oh, your benefits don't quite cover that. And when you are in the midst of a qualifying event that these kinds of things cover, is the worst possible time to try to navigate a system like that. And my concern is that the motivation for a private company is very different from a public entity charged with making these kinds of decisions for people. The employment division is where this program would live. They definitely have had some issues. A lot of that, my understanding, is hopefully going to be alleviated with the new software program that they have finally, long overdue, implemented. Pool avoidance is not my goal. As someone who worked on this policy, and as Commissioner Buck mentioned, it was not the recommendation as a best practice of advocates working on this long overdue legislation that we not lift each other up collectively as a state and share that pool the way we do for Social Security and unemployment and so on. I think I just have real concerns. The wage replacement, this is a very different benefit than anything else because it's based on wages. The wage replacement is based on wages earned, and that requires wage verification, all things that the employment division is already set up to do, which I think could really streamline the reimbursements and the claims. So income verification discrepancies are exactly the kind of thing that could provide for denial of coverage. And that would be a big concern of mine. So I'm not sold that we are doing the right thing for the long haul by privatizing yet another medical benefit for our employees, or that it's sending the right message generally to the public. So I have concerns. I would like more time. I would be happy to reconsider an order that pulls this program out of the order so that we don't hold up other benefits while we sort this out.
Okay, further discussion. I'm going to take a turn in a moment. I have a number of things to say. Commissioner Bozovich.
I just have a quick question. How many other large counties are going with the state versus contracting this service out in a similar fashion?
Thank you, Chair Farr, Commissioner Bozovich. I don't have a number for you, but as Ms. Holmes indicated, when we met with the cohort that we formed, We had folks to the north, the east, utilities and local governments that we were talking to. None of them were going to go with the state at that point. Of course, they had their own due diligence to do through RFP processes and, so I'm not sure what their final answer is at this point, but during those meetings, we were all looking to going with a private company.
So this is multiple organizations with multiple HR professionals understanding that it's probably best for their employees to go with a private contractor to supply this benefit. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you. Where do I start? The first thing I'm going to start with is customer service. That's not a term we throw around. And I'm going to look at you, Ms. Moskowitz. We don't throw around customer service. We are customer service. That's all we do. We have to pay strict attention at all times to what is the best for the people who are trying to access the services that we provide, because many of the services we provide simply, you can't go down the street and get them. We're the only provider. So we have a tremendous responsibility as the only provider to make certain we provide the best customer service, period. End of comment, end of question. And if anybody disagrees with that, then I'm not going to have lunch with you today. So, you're all invited, by the way. That being said, with that umbrella, I'm considering why is it better customer service to go with a private provider as opposed to go with the state? Now I'm going to answer my own question briefly, and then I'm going to ask you to verify or shoot me down. The first off, you mentioned a one-stop shopping so that they don't have to wade through, quite often at a time of crisis, wade through different systems in order to access the services that they require, that they need, that they're going to have, that they've earned. So that's one reason. And the second is that private providers tend to offer broader presentations of services. Types of services, and we can look at larger providers in a number of different ways that they do more, they can do more efficiently than smaller providers, and then quite often the state, in my experience. The third thing is that we need to make certain that people's claims aren't being denied. Now, my experience with private providers, just recently I had a big claim, insurance claim, and boy, I'll tell you, they help me. They're paid to help you, and generally speaking, I would expect that the county would demand that kind of service from our providers, as we have. I also remember when we began self-insurance and the long. Years of research that went into it, Mr. Moskowitz, before we went into self-insurance. Not an easy step, but we're very glad to do it. But still, we contract with a private provider for our self-insurance. So private providers are just quite often better at it. My experience with the state, I love them. I was a state rep. I've got to defend them every single place that I can. But a question before I answer with my experience is: would this be a new service for the state, a new administration that they're setting up? And they're really good at that, aren't they? Over and over again, they demonstrate that they set up new administrations and make it smooth, like rental assistance, like statewide insurance. They're not. In my experience, they don't do things out of the gate very, very well, whereas Standard Insurance or any other provider, Hartford for that matter, that's what they do. They're ready to do it. And we've already dealt with private providers on similar types of insurance. So for me, looking at this today, as you brought it to us today, we only have one more opportunity before November 3rd. That wouldn't be next week. It would actually be November 8th to take another look at this. Commissioner Vice Chair Trieger is suggesting that we divide this out somehow. I'm prepared to move forward with this today because of the research that you've done, the lateral research that you've engaged in, and the fact that you've researched it, and I believe we're ready to move forward with it. We can take another look at it in 1 year, and I'd like to hear more about what the Hartford wasn't doing, why they weren't, and I've got a quote here. Let me write. The current provider has not provided the level of customer service that we expect and that is required. You said that, pretty close to that. So I'd like to hear why and why we think that Standard would be better. I'm presuming that you've done the research on that. So with that, those are my assertions. Did I get anything wrong?
Chair, thank you for your comments and your questions. I'll defer to Crystal on, I know the RFP process and the reference checks and talking to other organizations that use the standard in just a second. But I did want to first talk about what you led with, which was customer service, which, yes, you know, that's something we're always striving to. How can we provide the best customer service, especially when employees are in a time of need? And one of the, you know, one of just the broad scenario when you think of, with all due respect to the state, you know, they have large organizations, they have broad, you know, responsibilities and a lot on their plate. And coming out of COVID certainly hasn't made this less challenging. However, we've painted scenarios where employees come to us when they get stuck, right? It's like, I can't get an answer, or how come this was denied? And we can pick up the phone and we can, you know, we have a direct dial in and can even sometimes access information to help us, you know, respond back to that employee or lift something back up to that third party provider. Now with the state, we won't have that relationship. We don't have the ability to do that on behalf of the state. So we will be telling employees, you know, here are the state contact phone numbers and information that you will have to seek this information, because they're not our vendor. They're working directly with employees. And so especially as this is brand new and there are so many uncertainties, we really are wanting to try to bridge this transition as smoothly as possible and be able to know that we can pick up the phone and reach out and have conversations to help support employees if anything is, awry with their concerns. Now, Crystal, do you want to go ahead and address the due diligence piece?
Thank you, Chair Farr. Yeah, we had the same concerns following the Hartford, obviously not getting into specifics, but I have Sherry Sanders here. She's our senior HR leaves analyst. I have to say she has really held their feet to the fire when things go awry for employees, and then employees come to her, and between her and Timothy Russell, they navigate a lot of those systems for the employee on their behalf, because they aren't in a space, as Vice Chair Trieger pointed out, when you're going through those medical crises, whether it's for yourself or your family member, the last thing you need to do is try to navigate those things. So with the standard, when we did our interviews, one of the questions we did ask them is, about the cultural piece and how are they going to support our employees and the customer service. And they really aligned with our organization's culture, speaking to the fact that they support employees. They will be working with us really closely. They talked about how they were supported through the pandemic, even as an employee of the standard, and it really aligned with how we supported our employees through the pandemic. So those types of things really spoke to us. I also will say one of their customers has been their customer for 65 years, I believe it was. I mean, a long time, and they're a Oregon State employer. So one of the disconnects we find with employees is when they're calling the Hartford is they may reach somebody that is not in our state. And so they're not very knowledgeable on our state plans too. And so that was a big concern for us and something that we considered. I don't know, Sherry, did you have anything to add?
Thank you, Commissioner, for your time. And I'm Sherry Sanders. I'm the senior leaves analyst for Lane County. And between myself and my colleague, Tim Russell, we handle all of the leaves for Lane County. As Crystal mentioned, I'm a big proponent of holding my vendors accountable. And I created a weekly meeting with the Hartford to go over outstanding claims, pending claims. So customer service for me is key. I agree with my colleagues in regards to not having our employees at a critical time in their life having to deal with information that's not submitted, incomplete information. We have employees who we know of a leave today, and they're starting tomorrow. It doesn't give the insurance company very much time to receive the medical information, to even approve the claim timely, to start paying that employee. I want to remind everybody, if we went with the state plan, an employee would be filing PLO with the state plan, but FMLA and OFLA runs concurrently with PLO. So that would require an employee not only to contact the Hartford or the state to set up their PLO claim, they would also have to contact our provider to set up an FMLA and OFA claim. So that's 2 phone calls that an employee would have to make, or their family members, in that time. And that is another reason why we feel one stop, where the employee would only have to make 1 phone call to set up their claim, to start the process going. So that's another key component. Another area that I'd like to bring up, we did an employee survey last year regarding the Hartford, and we will bring those results to you if you'd like to see those. And that was something that we knew things were bad. We knew that employees were not happy, because they definitely share things with us when we talked with them. But we'll provide you with some of that information that tells you one of the reasons why, how we hold our vendors accountable to good customer service. Again, if they file a claim with Oregon, there's nothing we can do. We won't have somebody to call to say what's going on with this employee's claim, and so that I see as a negative for our employees.
You know, the word you just provided, your testimony, I'll call it, is the most powerful that I've heard today regarding the actual on-the-spot response that we can expect from a private employer, a private party that we would not necessarily be able to expect from the state, because we know I've dealt with the state. When you get to a dead end and it's Friday afternoon at 4:30, finish the sentence. I have more to say, Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate your comment about who has experience running this, but this is a new and unique program, a universal benefits program, based on earnings. So private insurers don't have experience running that kind of program either. When you say there will be no one to call, can you explain that more? I mean, there will be a staffed office tasked with administering this program. And the corollary question is, does the state not have a role regardless of whether we outsource this to a private company? The state still has an enforcement role to play in this.
That's correct. Thank you for the question. That's correct. They would, they would be gathering the medical information from the employee and their doctor. If there was a glitch, let's say what we encounter when we administer leaves is a lot of times medical information that an employee, that an employee's doctor sends to the insurance carrier is incomplete, and so the employee will call and say, I don't understand. My doctor submitted it. We had an employee sit in the doctor's office until the doctor's office faxed the medical information to the insurance carrier. And so, we intervene when we get a call from an employee that asks, what's going on? We won't have that ability with the state. I won't be able to call, Tim won't be able to call and say, Crystal filed a claim today. We understand that there's a problem with something. What can we do to help facilitate her claim? That we won't have that option. We will receive information that Crystal filed a claim with the state. We'll receive information that the state has accepted and or denied. But as an intermediary for Crystal, I won't have that option. She will have to fight her own claim.
Thank you. And that is one of the concerns, is that the employee will have to work directly with the state, and that they'll still come to us for help, and we won't have that, as Sherry said, that intermediary.
Continue.
Upon what is that based, though, that there won't be someone in the office administering these claims that we'll be able to call? I'm still not clear why we know that's going to work.
Well, and that's part of the questions. That is a good question that comes up. And because it's a medical claim that the employee would be going to the state for, it's really between the two of them at that point versus, and it is a protected, class. So we would, if we went with the private, the standard to do paid leave Oregon, then we would have more control over how we could help our employees navigate those systems. I think that's what we're trying to get to.
It's still protected medical information, no matter who's administering the claim, and the claimant has to give permission to allow someone else access to it, whether that's a private company or a state managed program.
Right, correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Buck, followed by Commissioner Burney.
Thank you, Chair.
Mhm.
I am sure that we could continue talking about this for a couple of hours. There's a lot I think we just don't know. And some answers you will not be able to get because it hasn't been fleshed out with the state yet. I am still in a place where I am learning a whole heck of a lot of more information about this. I wasn't part of its original formation or advocacy of its original formation. And so I'm trying to get up to speed as fast as possible. And there are clearly some really good reasons to go with a third party, and also some really good reasons not to go with a third party. And I, again, am asking the rest of the board if we could put this on next week's agenda so that we can have just a little bit more time to talk through some of these things. I like the option of being able to at least, the very least, move forward all the other things that are included in this particular order so that you can carry on and having this discussion separately on whether we want to add it to the new standard contract or not add it. And I know that that might change some costing potentially. I don't know how they cost out their whole suite of services for us, but asking what it would be with or without this particular added into the contract would be interesting for me to know. It also tells me, you know, how much that service is costing in and of itself. You know, with wildfire work, I have worked with no less than 10 different state agencies. Some of them work well and some of them are really don't work well. And that will be part of my evaluation because we know it's going to live in this unemployment department. I don't know how well that they're going to be able to administer this. I also don't know how well Harvard's going to be able to administer this because there's still so much up in the air and rules that haven't been put out. But I do request of the board if we could give this one more week. We really only have next week to make a decision on this before we're down.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. And next week's agenda is pretty full already. I've received that comment and we set the agenda this morning. We do have 2 weeks between now and the drop dead date of November 30th that we'll be meeting. And I'm not opposed to moving it forward if we need to. I'd prefer that we take action today to give us the buffer between now and the deadline. But really, when we're talking about customer service, I want to make certain that we are doing the absolute best for the people who require the service because we are the only providers. And if we have issues with the state's not accountable to us. They demonstrate that over and over again. They're not accountable to us. Now, in the final analysis, they ultimately should be, but on a regular daily basis, whether it's human services, whether it's health issues, whether it's OHA, whether it's the Department of Justice, they're not accountable to Lane County. Our providers are accountable to Lane County. Commissioner Burney.
That's a tough act to follow, Chair. I agree with you 100%. I'm going to end in the same place that Commissioner Buck is at, but I wanted to first say that there's no question, at least for me, about the methodology you employed, the seriousness with which you're making this recommendation and the decisions, your strong desire to just move on, to get this figured out and move on. I totally relate to that. I also think that this is certainly beyond what I hope is this out there discussion about public versus private. Remember, my question was, and you answered it, Ms. Moody, but it had to do with self-administering as a desirable end goal, which it sounds like it kind of is. It's how we get there. and if it's feasible to get there. I do want to, when as a young man, I really believe in public interest. I really do. And I think that that's what this organization, I would hope, is all about. Not private interest, but public interest. And yet in my life, I have to admit, I've seen government agencies that just didn't do the job. And sometimes we're staffed by people that didn't have a passion. And I've seen that in the private sector too. And my analysis is it's often more a function of size than it is of sector. And bureaucracy can get in the private sector just as it can in the public. So for me, the good thing about board engagement is the board's engaged. The frustrating thing is that it can slow some things up a little bit. Chair, I know that you disagree, but I would like to understand this one piece that's new better, and have a time where we can get into it more. And if that's in a week or 2 weeks, that would be my preference as it relates to this new piece of what we're looking at. Thank you for the time.
Okay, we're looking at the next 2 weeks agendas to see how that could be facilitated at this point in time. That being said, private versus public, I will contend this, that private agencies, private entities are in the public benefit, because they provide the things that we use on a daily basis. And you can't differentiate between the two. Sometimes there are things that government does better. Sometimes there are things that in this country that private industry does better. For instance, these microphones right here, this dais right here, did government agencies provide this for us? No, it's all done through private industry. We use private industry because it is an efficient way to do things. And those who seek excessive profit tend to be weaned out in the business that we do here at Lane County. And if in some cases you can always point to examples in larger governments, but really here in Lane County, I trust that we do business with the private entities that give us the best service for the value. And we do it on request for proposal. We do it on very detailed analysis of the services being provided. And like the Hartford, if they're not doing it, we dump them. They're out of here. They're gone. So that's the way we do business. Private industry and profit aren't a bad thing. And anybody who says so, just you really aren't bearing in mind that you drive a car, you wear clothes, you speak through a microphone, and you have a computer, all provided by private industry. And darn it, somebody made profit on all of those things. So Commissioner Bozovich?
Yeah, I just real quick say I'm okay with delaying the decision today, provided it's not done and purposely to delay long enough that we do a de facto decision because we miss a deadline.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, so I want to make sure that's clear because we do have a deadline coming up. And I will say I find it interesting that folks that talk continuously about community benefits, and we're talking about contracting with an Oregon company, what we pay them to minister this comes back into the community, through pay and benefits to somebody. So it's, if that, desire to be local and all that stuff, we're talking about hiring an Oregon company. So that's just want to put that out there. And I think that the one stop is beneficial. I have enough of my questions answered, but I want to have the board move together on this. And I think if we wait a week or so for more information, more questions to be answered, that's fine with me if we can fit it into our agenda. I just don't want to have this become a de facto decision of missing a deadline.
Thank you, Commissioner. Then Ms. Toller, thank you for the research you put into this. Thank you for a great presentation this morning. Looks like we're not going to pass an order today, but Mr. Mokryski, let's take a look at next week to see if somehow we can wedge it in for next week. Otherwise, we can take a look sometime between now and the afternoon session today as to whether or not we can put it in next week or if it needs to be pushed to the following week. But we do have that hard deadline. And really the deadline's not November 30th for us, it's November 8th, because that's the last time we meet before Thanksgiving. So is that, Ms. Mokryski, can we move forward with that as I'm suggesting right now? Okay. You have to say yes, but can we really do it? Right on. Okay, then Ms. Holmes, go ahead. You look like you have something to say.
in order to be productive, if we're moving this out a week to answer questions, we want to make sure that we know what the questions are that you would like us to research to come back to have a decision made.
Very good.
So to the extent that you have questions, if you could email those to Crystal Tuller, as she'll be the intake person, and we'll then as a group work on prepping for the next session that we can come back on the agenda.
The okay, hang on a second. I'm digesting instructions that I'm receiving. Okay, good. Then without objection, I emailed questions, but Commissioner Buck, maybe you have something prior to closing today's session.
I appreciate that. And I'm just going to telegraph one major question that I'll have. And that is, I've got, information that I provided you with a laundry list of organizations that are not interested in privatizing this particular portion of the suite of services we're talking about with Sandard. And what I want to know is why? Why would all these public employee associations throughout the state of Oregon be so adamant that this is not going private is not the best way to actually administer this program and being able to mitigate those questions? Because that's really at the heart of my concern after this full discussion.
Philosophical discussion came up earlier in this meeting, and probably we're going to get into that a little bit. And we can expect that when we have this discussion. Next week is going to be tough to get this on the agenda because next week in the afternoon we have a full session on the multi-use facility, and we expect in the morning, I don't know, we could get a couple of hours of public testimony, and we really have to understand that may happen in the morning next week. So, Ms. Mokrajski, I don't think next week's good for bringing this back. So let's take a look and see if I'm correct in that, and second, if it has to be the following week. So with that, I'm sorry that we're not able to come to a decision today. As I said, I'm prepared to trust your analysis, trust the work that we've done, trust the input that we've received regarding how we handle leaves, and how we can stay in contact with the people who are paying for service versus the state, who really is its own sovereign entity. So that being said, I'd like to close this, but if Commissioner Burney, if there's something else you need to say.
It's pure logistics, Chair, and thank you very much for your generosity here. I'm just looking at, we have week of November 1st and week of November 8th. I would just like to know, to make this really workable, Alana, if the week of November 8th is when we bring this up, and to be as efficient as possible, when would you like questions by, so that staff knows there's a cutoff, we know we have to prepare. This can be a relatively quick item on the next board meeting.
And remember, that clock is a minute fast.
I can't speak for Crystal and the team. I would want to say within the next couple of days, because depending on the questions, how much time, plus, carving that out from the other work that's already on our plates.
So if this is put on November 8th, before the end of this week, you need the questions.
Yes.
That's 3 days from now. So could we say by close of business on Thursday? That work? That way you have Friday to take a look at them and begin the work on Friday. Is that okay?
Chair, because the intent is for efficiency, since this has been such a long discussion.
Okay. So by close of business on by 5 p.m. Friday, any questions? Now, we're not going to say it's 5:05, you missed it. But okay, great. So do you have anything else you'd like to add? Thank you for, once again, the research. I see a whole team of people who have been working on this. Thank you for all of the work that's gone into this. This didn't come lightly. And for anybody who's keeping an eye on this online, click view items and you'll see the entire body of work, not the entire body, but the synopsis of the body of work that's gone into this. Thank you very much. And thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. We really appreciate your time and discussion this morning. Thank you.
All right, then, as the room clears, Ms. Mokrajski, that became an assignment. We'll hear about that at the end of today's meeting. So we'll move on to Public Works. We have a discussion on code variance options within the urban growth boundary. And today, Ms. Mokrajski, I know that Kieran Miller is with us, and I'll ask you to introduce him. But this is a discussion a number of us have been waiting to hear, Mr. Miller, and it's regarding the fact that inside the urban growth boundary, the city typically administers code whereas they're administering county code. That's kind of a quick synopsis. And that's where some of our customers, I'll use that term again, some of our customers are wondering why the county can't do something when the city is telling them that they need to comply. Ms. Morcracy, I'll turn it over to you.
Our land management division manager.
Thank you, Chair Farr, and good morning, commissioners. Yeah, thanks for that great segue into this. That's a great way to introduce the topic. So just quick bit of background. Back on August 9th, the board received public testimony from a resident inside the urban growth boundary of Eugene. That resident had placed a recreational vehicle in their backyard with the intent of having their son had recently lost his living situation and wanted to house his son in that RV. In addition to placing the RV, this landowner built a fence. The fence actually extended into the public right of way, and it exceeded the height limitation. That was to screen the area and to provide privacy. So as a result of that, there was a complaint from a neighbor inside the urban growth boundary. Within the UGB area, the city of Eugene does administer the land use and building codes. And there's a whole history to this process. It goes back to the mid 80s when the city, both Eugene and Springfield and Lane County, entered into what were referred to as the 190 agreements, or the urban transition area intergovernmental agreements. And basically at that time, the cities and the county determined that it was in the best interest for everyone if the cities administered land use and building codes within the UGBs. Those IGAs have been in place since then. Occasionally issues pop up where there is a rub, and it can be a confusing patchwork of sort of jurisdictional, authority in that area, and folks don't know who to turn to because, for example, in certain instances, Lane County administers the nuisance code. Our code enforcement will administer the nuisance code, but the city code enforcement administers the building code implementation. So it can be confusing, which we recognize. It's been twice, probably in the last 18 months, that this situation with an RV has arisen. Obviously, in this time of, this housing crisis, folks are trying to find whatever options they can to find, living situations. And within the urban growth boundary, the prolonged overnight camping is not allowed. It hasn't been adopted by Lane County to allow camping within this area. And within the city limits, they do allow temporary overnight camping. So that's kind of the rub. These individuals who live in the urban growth boundary, they see that folks just right across the street in the city limits have this ability, but yet they do not. So the board, having received this testimony, asked staff to look into the issue. The property owner, the specific request was for staff to investigate whether or not there's a variance available to this individual to be able to both keep the height of the fence and the location of the fence where it is, and to also allow the RV to stay in its current location. We've done some research. I spoke with the resident as well as City of Eugene staff and looked at the code a bit deeper. There are variance options available for the fence. I mean, that's not the difficult issue. The main issue, which I point to in the memo, is really that a variance isn't typically the way you would allow a new use in a zone. Variance options are typically in place to, alleviate some sort of a burden that a property owner has because of some unique circumstances. Maybe it's the shape of their lot is really skinny and they can't meet the setbacks, for example. So we can, apply some sort of a numeric variance to the code. It typically is not in place to allow uses that others in that same situation couldn't enjoy, or to bestow some economic benefit onto a property owner. So variance doesn't really seem like the correct mechanism to address this issue. And I do apologize, in my memo, I didn't get into the actual potential solution that I think we have, because at that point in time, a few weeks back, I wasn't sure that it was feasible legally, because as I mentioned, the city of Eugene allows camping inside the urban growth boundaries, but within the UGB, it was unclear if the rules, the county administers the land use rules there. And obviously we have to work under the statewide land use system where there are density issues, which the board is well aware of. Having researched that a bit more and also spoke with staff at the city of Eugene, it may be feasible that the best way to address this would be through a code amendment to the UGB UL code that would allow camping within that designated area. We're confident that we couldn't extend that out into rural Lane County, but within the urban growth boundary, within an area that's eventually intended to intensify the density, it appears that that's probably a viable option. So that would be my recommendation if the board is interested in pursuing a potential solution here, is to direct staff to pursue a code amendment to the UL code to try to add this camping provision within it. There's probably going to be that's a public process, and I can envision that there will be some neighbors in the urban growth boundary who might not support camping in backyards. So I'm not saying it's an easy lift by any means, but it is an option that the board could pursue.
Well, Mr. Miller, that is brilliantly analyzed and brought forward. It was my committee back in the 1990s that did the policy work on what is the Eugene camping ordinance that allowed for backyard camping and driveway camping and church parking lot camping, etc. And that ordinance has evolved, and it continues to evolve. And this would be a further evolution of such an ordinance inside the city limits of Eugene that would spread it to the urban growth boundary of Eugene. I like the solution that you're proposing. Discussion. Commissioner Burney.
Would that also extend to urban growth boundaries, no matter which city they're a part of?
Not necessarily, no. We would have to adopt individual code amendments within. So for the small cities, there's the Lane Code Chapter 10 is applicable within the urban growth boundary of the city of Springfield. Springfield and Lane County would actually have to co-adopt amendments to change the code within that area. Whereas in the urban growth boundary of Eugene, the Board of Commissioners is sole authority there, and that you could amend the code.
Gotcha. Well, I can say that several similar circumstances have come to my attention, whether I wanted them to or not, in the Springfield's urban growth boundary. So if this is something we move forward on, I'd ask to start that process also.
And Springfield has a chunk of urban transition in Glenwood, for instance.
Well, that's exactly
not unlike what we experience in River Road, Santa Clara, predominantly.
It's very similar.
Commissioner Buck.
It sounds like if we move forward with this and what you're suggesting here, that is compatible with the city of Eugene's codes for being able to camp. And if it's isolated, to within a city that is compatible with, knowing that that's going to be where they grow out here eventually, I could support that.
Excellent. Further discussion, Commissioner Bozvich.
Thank you. So a couple quick questions. So there's no way to resolve this utilizing the hardship dwelling application? Because I know we allow RVs to be utilized as a hardship dwelling.
My understanding that this isn't and hasn't been presented as a hardship situation where there's somebody in need of medical help or otherwise.
So the financial issue is not necessarily considered. So I just wanted to make that clear. I'm a little concerned that, if we do something here, we don't have to do a Metro Plan amendment.
I don't believe so. No, this would be just a straight, we're not changing any plan designations or anything. This would be a text amendment to the code language, and typically those don't trigger a plan amendment.
Okay. Yeah, because if it is specific to Eugene, that kind of gets us into that whole Metro Plan mess.
You'd like to,
yeah. Which leads me to another question. Would it be possible to resolve this through some kind of emergency order where we actually allow for a set period of time this kind of RV camping in certain residential areas, where it wouldn't be necessarily a land use decision and be related to the current housing emergency, and is only applicable for the next 2 years when and would come up with a sunset where we'd have to extend it or something like that. Is it maybe an easier fix to go there versus in the land use side of things? Because there's an awful lot we've done, to waive requirements, et cetera. Holiday Farm Fire, we waived permit fees and all that stuff just by board order. We didn't have to go through, extensive land use procedures to do some of those actions. Is there a possibility to do this with a non-land use action?
Commissioner Bozovich, it's a good question. I hope there would be. That would be a much simpler process. It's something we can investigate. I know that the city of Eugene, they didn't actually amend their land use ordinance when they provided the temporary campground provisions. It's within their code enforcement, chapter 4, not chapter 9 of the Eugene code. So there may be some options there. Yeah, I'd have to investigate that though.
Yeah, I just think it may be a cleaner way to fix this. And if it has a sunset, it might be more palatable to the people that would be objecting, and the NIMBYs, that they know it's not a permanent rule. Mm-hmm. Where if we go through land use, we're going to have, fors and against in here and possible appeals and on and on and on and on and on. So I just was wondering if there's just a way to handle this with a legislative emergency declaration of some kind, but that's a much more legal question. As I see, we do have legal staff in the room, so I'm sure that the county counsel's office is monitoring this. So that would be kind of my just one way of dealing with this, dealing with it rather quickly. If we did it as even if it has to be an ordinance where it amends code, it could be done, in a month or so with an emergency clause on it, so it's effective immediately and resolve this issue fairly quickly.
And I think, for a quick fix, particularly on the existent issues that we're looking at, and Mr. Riley and others, that would be a quick fix. But ultimately, we should bring things in alignment and make it easier for people to understand that, the city code and the county code is different, but the city enforces the county code, and sometimes the city will say, "Oh, it's their fault," and we say it's their. Well, it's people feel that they have the perception of pointing fingers at each other, even though, Mr. Miller, we know that's not exactly what is happening. That is certainly what it feels like when the city says, "Well, the county is a county code," and the county says, "Well, it's the city enforcing it." So, Commissioner Buck.
So I'm trying to digest your suggestion there for some emergency order, and what comes to mind specifically is, when we're changing or altering code, for me, I'm trying to project, a long-term and fix a long-term systemic issue, and not just one isolated incident. And not to say that people's individual issues that they come to us for aren't important, because I work with that every day upriver. But I'm trying to find solutions for the long term that will be for a variety of people. So I think I am not quite there with the emergency idea, because I think I need to wrap my head around it a little bit more before I'm there. But I'm definitely okay with trying to find a longer term fix for the problem.
Thank you. Then let me offer this, that let's, as an assignment out of this, let's begin to work on the longer term solution. And I don't know how long that is, if it's a few weeks, few months, or if if it's longer than that, I'll ask you for more information on that. But in the meantime, if there is something that is possible, if you could bring that forward to us, and that way we could take a look at what the specifics are of it before we act on a short-term issue, without delaying the work on the longer-term issue, which is something that we ultimately, we're not going to fully, the city of Eugene is not going to fully incorporate inside the urban growth boundary in the foreseeable future, nor is the city of Springfield. So this is something that's going to come up, and I think the city of Springfield needs to look at the Eugene camping ordinance and see if it's something that they could palette, that would fit on their palette, because it does work. It took a great deal of work back in the 90s, and it really causes very few, if any, issues. Because people know what the ordinance is, they know what they can do, what they can't do, and they know the stipulations. the rules that if you are going to have somebody in your backyard in a movable vehicle, then that they know what you have to do to allow that to happen. And at that point, it becomes there's no complaint that other than nuisance that is raisable. So from that, then, Mr. Miller, and there may be further discussion, but so we'll begin to work on and I'll look at you, Mr. McCrice, because I can't tell Mr. Miller what to do. Begin to work on a longer term fix that brings Lane County code inside the Eugene urban growth boundary in line with what the city of Eugene allows. But in the meantime, if there is an administrative fix, an emergency managed administrative fix, if you could bring that forward, let's see, by 4 o'clock today.
3:30.
And if you could bring that forward post haste, as quickly as you can, if there's something you can let us know by a memo even in the next few days. Then if there is something, or if it's completely out of the realm of possibility with Oregon's land use laws, then let us know that too. Is that clear?
I believe so, yeah. So we're looking at what's a short-term fix, and then the longer term, if that requires a code amendment or some other mechanism. I will say for the immediate situation with these couple of residents within the UGB of Eugene, the city's agreed that as long as the county is pursuing and looking into this issue about potentially allowing these things, they're holding off on any enforcement action on these individuals. So that's resolved for the time being, as long as we're kind of making progress towards a solution.
Thank you for making me not ask that question.
That sounds like the best immediate resolution.
So for today, I can breathe easily, knowing that we have an immediate issue that's been resolved. We have a shorter term issue, the potential we're going to look at, and then we're going to deal with the long term issue in due process. Very good. Ms. Miller, thank you. Wow. You always exceed my expectations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCrice. Then we will move down to next up is the county council, and I believe Mr. Sebastian Tapia, who is acting is that in command or in charge of the county council?
Chair Farr, Commissioners, Sebastian Tapia, Assistant County Council, filling in for Steve Dingle. We have no announcements.
No announcement today. Thank you for being down here to tell us that, Mr. Tapia. Then we will county administration, Mr. Mokryski. We do have need for executive session this morning, so I'll move to item 10A, which is announcements from county administration.
So I just have one. It's rather lengthy because it's an election update, but I think this is really important that we provide a thorough update on our election for this year. So we are 2 weeks away, and thank you, Chair, for having the stickers, the I voted stickers available and calling that out at the beginning of the meeting. We're 2 weeks away from Election Day. Ballots are in the mail stream. About 270,000 ballots were mailed last Thursday, October 20th. Anyone that hasn't received their ballot by October 27th, which is this Thursday, should contact the Elections Division for replacement. All 21 drop boxes are open. Voters can find drop box locations in their ballot packet or on the election website. Ballot collection began yesterday. So our staff and extra help are out collecting ballots from each day from the ballot drop boxes. That began yesterday. 7,059 ballots were returned by the end of the day yesterday. This week, ballots will be sorted, batched, and signature verified, those that we've received. Ballots will be separated from their envelopes or deconstructed beginning November 1st, and ballot counting begins November 1st. The tentative schedule of events available at the elections website, that is lanecountyor.gov/elections. In-person observation is available for any person authorized by their local party, nonpartisan candidate, or the county clerk. Live streaming will be available via Lane County Elections YouTube channel. We have a YouTube channel you can watch all of this on for those that are unable to observe in person. Live streaming link will be available on the elections website. I'm halfway through the update. If this gives you any idea of the incredible, even increased transparency that we have around our elections process, The public logic and accuracy test will take place this Thursday. There are 3 of these tests. So this is the first. This Thursday will be the first of 3 public tests to ensure the voting systems are accurately recording votes marked on a test deck of ballots. So we do this 3 times. It'll happen this Thursday. Then the second test will occur immediately before counting begins, official counting begins. This is all to test the system, to make sure the system's working properly and it's counting ballots accurately. And then the final test actually happens after the ballots have been counted and before the election is certified. So 3 of these test runs this week, right before we do the actual counting ballots, and then right after. Again, this is the questions that people have and the desire for transparency to make sure that how do we know that ballots are being counted accurately? We're running these tests to actually ensure that the system is counting votes as they should be. Voters may see district changes on their ballots due to the once in a decade redistricting process that wrapped up in early 2022. You all remember that, don't you? So those changes happened, and you may see some slight adjustments. I think we had Commissioner Farr, you had a constituent that contacted you about a ballot that they had received. So the elections office has posted a redistricting overview with links to helpful maps and tools on their website to help voters navigate the changes. Voters should contact the election office if they have questions. So you're seeing a theme here. Go to the website, find the information you need. If you're confused or need further information, contact our election staff. So this final piece is specifically for those in the city of Florence. 100 voters in the city of Florence who live in the Fawn Ridge neighborhood were missing the Heceta PUD Public Utility District Subdivision 5 race on their ballots. So voters in that neighborhood can expect to receive 2 ballots. They'll have the original ballot with everything except the Heceta PUD, and then a supplemental ballot with only Heceta PUD. Voters will receive instructions and be contacted by the elections office if they have a phone or an email on file with those instructions. A press release was issued to alert voters, and the Secretary of State's office has been notified. So that's just specific to folks who live in Florence within the Fawn Ridge neighborhood. So we'll have 2 more updates, and another one next week, and then another one on November 8th.
Wow, that is a lot of information to digest, Ms. Morcrax. And I'm going to say this, I spent a few years in the House of Representatives, and on the wall of the House of Representatives is a mural depiction of a vote taking place. It's whether Oregon was going to be England or something else.
Did it go your way?
And is that shampoo? It went a way. I think it created the Oregon Territory, which we all know that the part of the Oregon Territory we didn't want is now called Washington, right? But my question is it more sophisticated today than it was in that mural?
That's a loaded question. Of course it is.
It is.
And we understand with sophistication comes complexity and sometimes confusion. And so, we're really excited not only about, the great work that our elections team has done in the past, but with Ms. Dawson, who you heard from, I think 2 weeks ago, who brings this experience from multiple states. She was really leaning into transparency around elections and making sure that we're doing everything we can to ensure the accuracy, the accountability, the transparency of this process. We want people to understand, this is their vote, right? This is like the core of our democracy. And we want people to understand, certainly return your ballot, but then we want you to know what happens with your ballot after you return it, and the security, the accountability with which we take that responsibility of how we process each individual ballot. And we're doing everything we can to let people into that process so that you can watch it and see it and track it and make sure that every vote is counted the way that it absolutely should be and was intended by the voter who returned their ballot. So we'll keep doing that. Welcome suggestions about how we can bring people into that process. But I'm excited about some of the changes that are happening and that are afoot.
Well, I want to point out that Lauren Blythe, Mr. Blythe, has just entered the room. And on Saturday morning before 8 a.m., I had a message from a constituent, not a constituent, but from a voter who said that their ballot was wrong. And they were looking at the state map, and they'd received the wrong ballot for the House of Representatives and Senate districts. And so I got a hold of Mr. Blythe ultimately. And This was before 8 o'clock, and before 9 o'clock, it was fixed. The voter was satisfied. They'd been looking at the wrong map, and online we made it very evident before game day was over that the right map was online, and that people were able to ascertain that they did actually receive the right ballot. So, Mr. Blythe, thank you for that. I'd like to thank you in public for the work you did before breakfast on Saturday morning to make this happen. So thank you. Questions or comments on from Ms. Mokraski? Commissioner Burney.
That was one heck of a game day, wasn't it? I went, I was trash texting all of my ex-business people in LA during that game. You'll remember the cluster that occurred last year during the redistricting process, when this body was told that we had to make a decision by a certain point. We did, and then we learned that was a few days too late to have made the redistricting decision. It was my understanding, in fact, I had communication from Ms. Betchart to the effect that the old maps that had to apply for the primary, because we had approved the new district lines a few days too past, we didn't know it at the time, a few days past the thing. Are those the same district lines relative to the county that are being applied to the general election? Or in fact, was the primary election with a different group of people per area than this general election now will be?
I'm just asking Lauren I'm not sure if Lauren has that.
You understand the question? It was just, okay.
Commissioner Burney, I believe I understand the question. If I can repeat it, if the May election used the old maps or the current maps, is that essentially?
No, we know the May election used the old maps. Yeah. So is the general election using the old maps so it's consistent, or is it using the current maps, which creates its own interesting situation?
So for the state and the state of Oregon, United States congressional and Senate races, it's using the new maps. For commissioner races, it's using the old maps. Those don't go into effect.
So interesting. Okay, thank you.
And I understand the reason for that. But, yes. Yeah, so that people who voted in West Lane in the spring are voting in the same people are voting in,
but
for instance.
And that makes sense. For means, just to play out, thanks, Terry, then I'm done on this. That also means, though, that for county maps, the areas that are being represented will then be the new district boundaries, correct?
Correct. And for the reasons that you cited a few minutes ago.
Thank you. Thank you.
And so I'll say that if you live right next to North Eugene High School, I'm still your county commissioner, but soon I will not be your county, even though it is North Eugene High School. I am the North Eugene County Commissioner. Okay. Very good. Thank you, Ms. Blythe. Ms. Mokraski, any further announcements?
That's it.
Good job. That's a great information. And boy, I'll tell you, if I'd like to go into elections usually the day or 2 days after the close of the balloting, and just see I stand back and watch from a distance what is going on, and it's amazing the intricacy that happens both at street level and below street level in elections. Then we'll move along. We do have need for executive session today. And I'm going to read us into executive session. After I read us into executive session, the regular meeting, the sound of my gavel, we will recess the regular board meeting, move into executive session, after which we will return at 1:30 in Harris Hall for regular session. The executive session will be remote, so we'll go into our own offices to conduct the executive session. And it's now about a minute fast. It's about 5 till 11. We'll reconvene in executive session at 5 minutes past 11. So that being said, the Board of Commissioners will meet in executive session to consider the employment of a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual agent. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192.6602A, which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purposes listed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in executive session. We reserve the right to come back out into public session should the need arise. Yes.
Sorry.
Does that give you enough?